Hello everyone, it's Bella Malloy here, host of Seek Travel Ride, and welcome back to yet another midweek mini episode where I am fueling your stoke and fire for wanderlust and bike travel. Now, this week I'm happy to share yet another update from our intrepid adventurer Olly Hargreaves, and he's going to be taking us to his experiences through Afghanistan. A country which I can guarantee most of us think of in times of war and conflict. And so it's pretty interesting to hear the stories of adventurers who've been in country and hear what they have seen with their own eyes, heard with their own ears, and everything else as well. Before I get to Olly's experiences, I have some shout outs to make. I have recently been asking questions on our Instagram page of our followers, and I want to shout them out now. The first shout outs have to do with bike security and what we specifically do to help keep our bikes secure when we are on our travels. Now, this is something that I have thought of many times before, especially more so when I am on my own, when I'm going to a supermarket, what am I going to do with my bike, and sometimes also at the campsite. So I put the question out here, and here are some of the answers that I have got. The first one is from Oscar J. Donovan, and he said, well, if they can make off with a loaded cargo bike with a jammed kickstand without waking me, it's theirs. So Oscar's pretty much going for the idea that it's going to be hard work to get his bike and also be noisy, so he's going to be alerted to it. The inherent safety of people that want to steal your bike not wanting to be heard or spotted there. Scott Sharrick, hey Scott, previous guest of the show and a superfan, you have said, I use an alarm that is made for motorcycles that attaches to the disc brake plate and it's very loud. There we go. An alarm. Sue_Chapel, another superfan. Hi Sue, and you have said, usually I just chain it to a tree or a fence. Look, that is a method that I have done at a campsite as well, training it to something that's not movable. And to be honest with you, whenever I lock my bike up, it really is more of a deterrent than anything else. Occasional_bikepacker. Hello, Jacob Ashton, a fellow previous guest of the show. You have said, I tuck one of the wheels under the fly of my tent and I set my pod on it so it will make a noise if moved. There you go. So Jacob's sort of taking the same tactic as Oscar J. Donovan there, with the thought that thieves don't want to be making noises, so to take his bike is going to disturb him and other people around him. Stu on tour, you say you lock it to your tent. I have heard of people doing that as well. And again, it's the same sort of thing. It sort of makes it inconvenient. It's not just that opportunistic, easy walk away with the bike. And the last one I have here is Rebecca Gross, and fans of the show will know we are also tracking Rebecca's progress from Austria, and the last update we heard from her on the show was she was in Mongolia. But Rebecca says, outside of Europe, I haven't really had to think about it that much. That one leaves me with a bit of a pause, doesn't it? Because I do wonder, I have heard this from other bike travellers as well, that as soon as they leave the Western countries behind, it has felt that the thought of bike security hasn't really been needed to be front and centre. Well, listeners, what about you? Have you got any tips about bike security there? Is it something that you've thought about? Have you had an experience of your bike being stolen while on tour? Send me through your hot tips. Send me a DM on Instagram. My account handle there is @SeekTravelRide. Okay, now it's time to hear Olly's update from Afghanistan and hear what it was all about.
Hey Bella, last thing you heard, I'd just got to Termez and I was staying in a hotel and sorting out all the visas that I needed and stuff, running back and forth from the consulate to the bank and so forth, trying to get everything sorted for going into Afghanistan. So I managed to get that all sorted and, got the visa back in my passport and had one kind of last night of comfort before kind of, venturing into the unknown, I guess. I was heading into Afghanistan the day after, and I've obviously seen some people that have travelled through, but, everyone's experience is always very different. So I was kind of bracing myself for anything to happen. I was feeling pretty calm about it, to be fair. I say, obviously, Jamie went through and had an amazing time. So that was the main kind of thing I was holding on to. I know, he's talks about when he went through it being one of the best times of his trip. So I was really looking forward to it and not really worried at all, to be honest, which I was more concerned about my lack of worry for going into Afghanistan than anything else, which is a bit weird, but yeah. So the kind of first realisation that you're going into Afghanistan was on the way over, you just get this glimpse of the Friendship Bridge going over to Afghanistan, and you're kind of cycling towards it. I mean, like, oh shit, like, there it is, kind of thing. There's Afghanistan, this place that has bombarded the media for the last, 20 or 30 years, and, nothing really good is ever said in Western media. So, it has this kind of aura about it. So when you see it, I wouldn't say it was intimidating, but it definitely makes you realise where you're going when you see that Friendship Bridge. And, I got to the border, came across, and again, it's that moment when you're cycling across the Friendship Bridge is really quite surreal that you're entering Afghanistan. You've got the Taliban guards on one side. It's all very, very secure. You've got turrets on either side, very well defended areas of land, and that makes you a little bit anxious. But then you get through and everyone is very, very nice. And it was one of the easiest border crossings of the entire trip, which was wild. I thought it would be a little bit more difficult, but I was through in about 20 minutes, I think. So that was kind of my first glimpse into Afghanistan. Once I got through the customs, I was immediately, noticed the difference in culture. It's very much, in Uzbekistan, everything is very well built up, very technological and all this kind of stuff. And you get to Afghanistan and there's not a lot of that everywhere. It's a lot of huts on the side of the road and workshops that are all wide open and everyone's walking around. Everyone is really kind and they're very interested to see you because it's still, they don't get a lot of tourists. So everyone's coming over to you almost immediately. And within the first few kilometres, people came over and gave me drinks and all this kind of stuff. It was like being back in Turkey. It's like, Turkey on steroids in terms of generosity and things. So yeah, I had a nice stretch of desert to cycle through, which again, completely different environment because it was very sandy desert, the type of desert you think of like Sahara and things. And yeah, going through to Mazar-e Sharif, where I had to get a permit from the Taliban in order to travel around. So I spent a few days in Mazar-e Sharif, and there was a little bit intense because you've got all these people and you've just arrived in the country and you kind of get mobbed when you go out in the city, which isn't the nicest. But, I went out, got myself some local attire and kind of got used to it for a couple of days while sorting out permits and the usual stuff when you go to a country like SIM card and changing money and stuff. And then kind of preparing myself to cycle down to Kabul. So yeah, I set off after getting everything sorted to cycle to Kabul, which took me about 4 days to get from Mazar-e Sharif to Kabul. I spent the whole time camping, which you're not supposed to. The Taliban are quite strict on you. They really want you to stay in hotels, not camp at all. It's kind of against the rules, but I felt fairly safe. I was very cautious. It's still a country. You need to be very careful of what you're doing and saying and things. But as long as you stick to the rules and you're not causing issues, you're pretty good. And yeah, along the way to Kabul, I had the same thing, enormous amounts of generosity. And again, just people being interested, coming over and saying hello and giving food and inviting you in and all this kind of stuff. And I had a really funny experience. There's a really long road and you have to go over a pass called Sarlang Pass to get to Kabul, which is at about 3,500 metres of altitude. And you're going up from Mazar-e Sharif, it's at about 1,000 or something. So it's quite a big climb up. And, it gets cold up there and stuff. And I slept right at the top. And it was the first time I kind of got caught camping. And I was just bivvying out the whole time I was there, because I thought, if I put a tent up, that's another thing I've got to pack away really quickly. So I just wanted to be able to get out and go if someone found me. And I woke up to the sound of footsteps, and this local guy, he was quite young, he saw me and just looked really shocked that this Westerner was camping or sleeping at the top of the mountain in a sleeping bag. And he kind of looked at me really puzzled and said, "Chai?" Do you want some chai? I was like, "Oh, no, it's okay, thank you." And he disappeared off and came back 5 minutes with about, I think it was like 10 other Afghan guys. And they were all workers working on building new roads and stuff at the top. And they came back and just started taking photos of me and with me whilst I was in my sleeping bag, which was, they were all really nice. It was funny, but it was a little bit of a weird thing. When you wake up in the morning, you really don't quite know what's going on because you're still so tired. It was that kind of experience, but it was all very good in the end. And then, continued on making my way to Kabul through various Taliban checkpoints, and all the checkpoints were very easy. There was no issues at them. It was just check the passport. And they never checked my permit once, which shows you kind of how lax it has become. And just slowly made my way to Kabul, which was it was a really nice ride, actually. The only bad bit of road is over Sarlang, which, to be honest, is a really terrible bit of road. But the rest of the roads are actually in pretty good condition, so it was quite nice cycling. I then had 3 or 4 days off in Kabul, and Jamie put me in contact with the family that had put him up, which was a really nice cross of journeys, because obviously he met them last year and they all loved him. They kept mentioning him the entire time. And it was really nice to, kind of experience that same thing that Jamie did. And they were really, really hospitable. They put me up, looked after me, fed me. They offered me basically the world whilst I was in Kabul. It just goes in another way to show how kind the people of Afghanistan really are. And they took me all around, not just the city of Kabul, but the outskirts, and took me up the mountains, and they had some pistols, so they took us shooting, some plastic bottles and stuff on top of the mountains, which I think they were a bit cautious about, because I'm not sure they were actually allowed to have the gun, because they kept on being a bit funny any time they heard a car. They were like, "Oh, quickly hide everything." But it was really, really nice to experience that and have a few days off the bike to experience a bit more of the Afghanistan culture and see the city of Kabul. Again, it's, Kabul kind of has this thing hanging over it from all the things you think of and you see online and in the media. And actually, it's quite a nice city, and it's massive. It's absolutely enormous. But it's a really cool city to walk around, and very different from anywhere else, really. After spending a bit of time in Kabul, I headed back off on the bike, basically going the exact same direction that I'd come. I cycled on the same road, just in reverse, all the way up to Polyhumri, where the road splits off, and one way you go up to Uzbekistan and the other way you go to Tajikistan. So I cycled back up that, which was not the best, because that road, I say, was really terrible. One of the worst roads I've cycled on in my life. But I just slowly went at it and got up and over the pass. And one of the more interesting interactions with the Taliban happened at that point, where I got to a station at about 6 o'clock in the evening, and they basically said, "You're not going any further. We won't let you go any further, because there's no hotels for another 25 kilometres and it's too late. So you're going to have to stay here." To which I was like, well, they were asking me, "Do you want to stay here?" I was like, I would like to keep going, but, if I really have to, I guess I have to, kind of thing. And they basically made me sleep in a little shop, and they were all hung out with me the entire night, asking some interesting questions and all this kind of stuff. And one of the things I found the most interesting was there was one of the younger Talib guys was trying to learn English, and he was speaking to me about it and trying to gain a bit of knowledge about the English language from me and trying to converse with me and stuff. But he was learning English by watching a YouTube tutorial from a woman which obviously in Afghanistan, women aren't allowed education and all this kind of stuff. And it was really one of those moments you're like, the hypocrisy of that is absolutely crazy. And I just found it.
If you've been listening to the show for a while, you will already know I'm a big fan of Zirali. They are an independent Aussie brand all about getting people outdoors. I have been wearing their gear on my rides and just in general. And recently I have been loving their trekking sandals. And the thing that I really love about them is that they are grippy, not slippy, which means if I want to explore around camp or maybe even go on a bit of a hike on some rocky terrain or steep uphill or downhill, I can do it with these sandals and not worry that I don't have the right footwear for it. Now, if you want to check out Zirali and support the podcast at the same time, click the Zirali link in the show notes. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, just mad that he was learning English from a woman, but in their opinion, women can't go into schools and things. It was really wild. But yeah, so we kind of hung out there and went to sleep. And then after kind of, forcing me to stay there, they said, "Oh, what time will you get up in the morning?" I said, I'll probably get up at, 7:30 and leave. And they woke me up at 6 o'clock and said, "You go now." And it kind of didn't give me a choice, basically booted me out and told me to leave, which was interesting. But yeah, I went back up over Sa Long Pass and slept at the top again because I was like, oh, why not? It was a really cool spot, and it was probably one of the coolest spots of camping that I'd done so far on the trip. It was a really, really nice spot with amazing scenery in the background, mountains towering over me and all sorts. But yeah, I continued a bit further and got to Polyhumry, where I bumped into some Afghan guys that live in England but come back over for 6 months at a time and live in Afghanistan, and they invited me to a wedding. I was like, oh, I don't know if I have the time, and I looked it up and worked it out and was like, okay, actually I do have the time. So I stayed with them and they invited me to stay and stuff, and they took me to this. It wasn't the actual wedding, it was like the night before the wedding, so they were having a big celebration. It was basically a big room full of all the friends and family, all guys, no women, but they're basically just making jokes, smoking hashish. And I was warned before going not to drink the chai, not to eat anything that was already open, and not to smoke anything anyone tried to give me, because there's a lot of hashish and other stuff that's mixed in apparently. So that was interesting to find out as well. But it was really interesting. I went back with one of the cousins and they said, "Oh, you're not actually staying where we took you before because you're not allowed to stay with the family." I think that's part of their culture. You're not allowed to stay in the family house where the women stay. So they all have these big guest houses which you stay in instead. And so he took me and gave me the guest house for the night, and then in the morning kind of took me back to the bike, gave me some food and said our goodbyes. So yeah, it was a really, really cool experience. I then had about 2 days or so cycled up to the border to cross back into Tajikistan. It was fairly easy riding, really good roads and stuff. And I think I had a tailwind actually for once. And I got another hotel in Kunduz and had a kind of last night having a look around, stocking up on supplies and stuff. And I met another guy who lived in London who had come across, he was actually gold prospecting, which was really interesting. He brought all of his gold refining tools. And we had a nice conversation. He said, "Oh, when you get to Kunduz, send me a message and we'll go out for dinner." So he took me to dinner. And it was another day that I actually wasn't feeling too well, so I couldn't eat much. But it was really interesting to kind of see his side of things. He actually invited me to stay with him, but the place that they were staying was another 60 kilometres out. It's too far for me to cycle now. It was getting late, and I thought, I'm just going to get a hotel and chill out for a bit. So yeah, the last 2 days were nice, and I got given a watermelon, or not a watermelon, sorry, just another melon on the side of the road the next day when I was cycling to the border. Yeah, I was given so much fruit and food and drink the entire time. It was a really, really cool country to visit. But yeah, so that was kind of the trip in Afghanistan, and the people in Afghanistan are just so friendly, generous and hospitable. Really are some of the kindest people that I've met on the trip. And so many people gave me water and drinks on the side of the road, lots of fruit, lots of nuts. One of the trucks actually gave me like a half frozen bottle of water, which was the nicest thing when it was like 40 degrees. It was one of the nicest things that someone could have given me. It was really, really pleasant. And yeah, so many people, invited me in for dinner and all this kind of stuff. It was a really, really special place to visit. And I think it's one of my favourite countries of the trip in total, just because the scenery is awesome. You've got these incredible mountains towering over, but you've also got deserts, you've also got farmland, you've got all these, amazing places. And Sarlong Pass is really, really cool to cycle up. And I mean, obviously I've just done the Pamir Highway, but it's very similar scenery to the Pamirs, but obviously I hadn't experienced that yet, so it was really unique when I went. It was the first kind of glimpse of it that I got. Yeah, it's really crazy difference between what you see in the media and what you actually experience when you go to these countries, because everyone that I met, if I mentioned that I was going to Afghanistan, I always got a response of like, oh, I don't know if it's safe for you to be doing that. Really? Why do you want to do that? Are you not worried that you're going to get hurt or kidnapped or whatever it was? And you go, and I felt really safe. There was only a few interactions with the Taliban where I was like, oh, okay, I don't like this. Very, very minor incidents along the entire trip. The majority of people were very, very kind, but including the Taliban. I mean, obviously they have an agenda. They are trying to protect tourists as much as they can because they want to increase the tourist industry, but still I had no issues whilst I was there, really. And yeah, it really, really does make you think about what you see in the media, because it was, I say, one of my favourite countries of the trip so far, I think. The food in Afghanistan is also incredible. They've got really unique dishes and all sorts of fruit, which was absolutely amazing. I absolutely love fruit, so it was readily available on the side of every road that you were cycling on. There was markets and things with selling fresh fruit, which was really nice. And they have these melons, which are the best melons I've ever had in my life, and there's no word of a lie. They were really, really good. And I was looking for them in Tajikistan because there's some cross-border Afghan markets, but none of them have them. So that is one thing I think I'm really going to miss. The food was amazing, and they've got really different drinks and the street food, which is readily available. You can just stop off, pay pennies and get all this food. But what I noticed as well with the street food was a lot of the times I would go in, or I would go to pay for it, and they would not accept the payment at all. It's like, you are a guest in the country, we don't want you paying, kind of thing, it's really, really nice and special to experience. Wearing the clothes as well is surprisingly comfortable to ride in. I thought it's going to start jamming in the chain, or it's going to start rubbing the wrong way and chafing and things, but actually it was quite comfy, and the air kind of flows through it all. I mean, as you know, it is very well designed for the climate. It was actually really nice and quite special to kind of blend into the country and wear their local dress, which you don't get in any other country, really. I know sometimes in Pakistan it's the same, and maybe Iran, and I'm sure there are a few other countries where you are kind of ushered to wear the local get-up, but majority of places you're just wearing your own clothes. So I think that's a really special part about Afghanistan, is you do kind of blend in with the locals. And with the headscarf, I really enjoyed kind of wrapping it up so no one even knew I was a tourist when I was walking around, and no one batted an eye at me, which was really interesting because I could just move around almost unseen, which was a really cool experience to do, and go off and see all these bits without kind of being, not being bothered, but sometimes in these countries, if you are a Westerner, you end up kind of drawing a crowd, and you can really easily avoid it with wearing their clothing, which is quite cool. So you obviously said about how it feels looking back on the whole, like the journey as a whole for this trip. So I'll end this one with that. And it really is quite amazing to see how far you've come in not an awful amount of time. I made it to Afghanistan in like 4 months, which is a bit mad that, 4 months of my time to get all the way from Manchester to Afghanistan. And that's, with a few breaks here and there, and it's not like fully gunning for it the whole way. And it really makes you think about how far you can actually get with your own 2 feet. It's really cool seeing all of it change by land because there's no break in between. Everything is slowly moving in one direction and changing, with whether it be the plants or the scenery or the animals that are around you. The environment going from desert into mountains into marshland or whatever, and it's really, really cool to see. And I think it makes you realise what you can do as well with having done it all with your own 2 legs. It is really, really cool experience. Another thing whilst we're on the subject of that is I think I've been very fortunate in my travels that I've been able to travel with so many different people, which has been really, really nice. I'm definitely someone who enjoys my own company and being with people. I truly do enjoy both sides of it. And, say my brother obviously met Malachi in Turkey and basically cycled the rest of the trip with him up to Vietnam pretty much. But I've been able to share it with so many different cyclists, and obviously everyone has their own way of doing things and their own personal preferences and stuff. It's been really, really enjoyable sharing it, whether it be for a day or a few days or a week or a month or even more. It's been really special, and making friends with people I think will probably last a lifetime. And also having friends and now obviously my dad join me for the trip, which has been really special as well. It's just been a really nice way of seeing the world.
Thank you so much, Ollie. That is an amazing update and also some amazing insights from your experiences there in country in Afghanistan. Listeners, I have to admit, the last year or so, I have had the absolute pleasure of being able to speak to a few people who have travelled through Afghanistan. Most recently was our intrepid traveller Fergal Guihan. I shared his story over 2 long-form episodes of the podcast just recently, and his experiences there personally were amazing. And Ollie, it sounds like you have had exactly the same type of experiences. It was really interesting to hear your anecdotes about going to the wedding and what you were warned off of. And the food in Afghanistan, I love a podcast episode that mentions food, Ollie, and I have to admit, thoughts of fresh fruit isn't something that comes to mind when I think of Afghanistan. Listeners, probably like you, I think of a war-torn country, I think of things being in ruins, I think of a population that's just dealt with conflict for decades, really. And I have to be honest, as a woman, I also think about the 50% of the population in Afghanistan where their rights are certainly anything but equal. And it sounds like, Ollie, your experiences were obviously had there just with the men because women just aren't being seen. And it's something that does, I guess, give me pause when I share stories about Afghanistan as a woman is not really knowing what to share about the country. I am intrigued, and I've learnt through this show that people's experiences in countries that we hear about are often further from the threats of safety and inherent danger that we are led to believe. For me, there's an extra layer with countries like Afghanistan where there is 50% of the population that, are treated very differently. Yeah, it's a hard one for me to wrestle with. It was really interesting hearing your insights there about the Taliban themselves teaching themselves English with a female teaching them. And I thought on the video there, and I thought like you, that's a really interesting insight. I have recently, listeners, just interviewed another amazing traveller, Thomas McIntyre, another Irishman, and his episodes will be released shortly. And we also go into a lot of detail about his experiences in Afghanistan there as well, and the complexities of travelling in these countries as a traveller. Olly, that's not to take anything at all away from your insights. I have enjoyed listening to them immensely, and my knowledge of Afghanistan is growing. I also really loved the idea that you were able to spend time with the exact same family that hosted your awesome brother Jamie as well. I'm sure they loved being able to have time with you, and what a way to link up those journeys. I think Jamie also took on the Salang Pass, and I had to laugh at the idea that you were cowboy camping up the top, and the first thing that the Afghan man who found you thought of in his puzzled state was, oh my gosh, it's cold, do you want a cup of chai? And then you were like the celebrity there instantly when all those Afghani men came to take their photos with you and stuff as well. And I guess that's another thing. It's a country that's been torn apart by war and is now starting to see tourists, and so it will be interesting to see how that all evolves for them. But listeners, I want you to let me know, what are your thoughts about hearing about stories from these countries? What are your thoughts about visiting them yourself? What have you learnt about hearing these stories as well? Let me know. Slide into my messages on Instagram. My handle there is @SeekTravelRide. And Olly, I believe the next update we'll hear from you is your experiences travelling with your awesome dad Phil through the Pamirs. Amazing, and I cannot wait. Thank you so much. Now, listeners, it's the time of the show which I love so much, and that is when I get to shout out to you, my super fans who have been dead set legends and yet again bought me some more coffees. Each week these virtual coffees come through. I get the messages. They fill me with amazing happiness to read. Just to know that the podcast is actually really fueling people's inspiration and wanderlust to get out there for themselves and to explore the world on two wheels. So this week I am saying a big, massive thank you to Judy Pearson. And Judy, you have said, hey Bella, after discovering your show, you've made several long drives fly by. I'm feeling absolutely inspired, and hopefully the butterfly effect of your interviews will see me setting out on my own adventures. Take care. Oh, thank you so much, Judy, and do me a favour, keep in touch and let me know where you take that bike adventure. I always hear these messages of people being inspired, and what makes me even happier is hearing about the adventures that you actually go on. And next I have Axel, and Axel, you have said a big thanks for your wonderful podcast. It makes me dream of future adventures, and it also always elevates my mood. Oh, thank you so much, Axel. I'm glad to be a mood lifter, and I'm glad to be there vicariously with you as you hear about these stories and start plotting out your own adventures. And the same question to you as I posed to Judy, where do you want those future adventures to be? Please let me know. And listeners, if you want to be like Judy Pearson and Axel and support me and the podcast, simply head to buymeacoffee.com/seektravelride. Buy me a coffee, but more importantly, let me know what is it that you are loving about tuning into the podcast and where is your next bike adventure going to take you. And until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.